Thank you. So, I'm a little afraid that this may be, the lecture may be a little bit long, so I'm just going to jump right in, okay? Impeachment. Here are my opening ideas about
We can't hear you.
Okay. Can't hear me?
No.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you give me a microphone? Okay, impeachment is, I am convinced this, okay, the most fun that you can have in a courtroom with your clothes on. Now, why you might have fun in a courtroom with your clothes off is an entirely different lecture. So, this is what good impeachment, I'm convinced, looks like. That's the lying witness. The guy in the right? This is me. I want this to be you. Oh, it gets better. Gets better. Gets better. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. Okay? That's what I want you to do. I want you to have that picture in your mind. All right? Here's the way that you do it. Okay? If we're going to impeach and impeach well, it has to fit your theory of the case and it has to fit your theory of the witness. Please, God, tell me that today is not the first time that you're hearing either of those terms. I know it's not, right? Because we've been talking about theory of the case, and God knows people must have talked to you last week already about you have to have a theory of the witness as well, right? You have to be able to articulate your theory of the witness just the same way that you have to be able to articulate your theory of the case. Who exactly is this person? Okay? Because if your impeachment, first of all, you have to decide whether or not to impeach. Right? We don't impeach for its own sake. We impeach because it advances our theory of the case. We impeach because it advances our theory of the witness. That means that if the witness is telling the truth, that if what the witness has just said on direct is better for us than what the prior statement was, we should choose not to impeach, right? Because our theory of this witness is that the witness is telling the truth. What is impeachment? To me, impeachment is anything that demonstrates that what the witness said is wrong. It's just that simple. It is anything at all that demonstrates that what the witness said is wrong. It may be wrong because it's a lie. And if your theory of the witness is that the witness is a liar, that's one kind of impeachment, and that's one way to go after it. And you now know that you have to impeach. And you have to look for every possible piece of impeachment that you can. It may be that the witness is wrong because the witness is mistaken. You also have to impeach, but that's a different kind of impeachment. And you have to do it in a way that's consistent with your theory that this witness is mistaken. It may be that your theory of the witness is that this witness is generally truthful, but lying about this particular thing. Conversely, it may be that your theory is that this person is just mistaken about everything. You need to have very clearly in your head what your theory of this witness is before you can decide, one, whether to impeach and which kind of an impeachment to do. Okay? Because what happens if you impeach for its own sake? Well, you tell me, what happens if you give an opening statement that's contrary to your theory of the case? That's not going to work so well, right? This is not just about, let's throw some stuff against the wall and see what sticks, right? That's not what we have been teaching you here for the last 2 weeks. It is have a laser-like place that you are going to take this jury by the hand and walk with them and guide them to. You need to know precisely where it is that you're going. Otherwise, impeachment that doesn't fit your theory of the case looks like this. Okay? You may as well chew your own leg off. Okay? Because that's what you're doing, right? Your theory of the case is that bone. Okay? You need to gnaw on that bone. You need to get your business done with that bone, okay? And if you just go off to impeach for the hell of it, you might as well sit down and chew your own leg off in front of the jury, okay? I'm just saying, okay? I'd like to be able to give you, visual clues of this. All right. It is anything that demonstrates that the testimony is wrong. Anything at all. Now, so often we think about this in terms of prior inconsistent statements, and trust me, we will get there. Okay? Trust me, we will get there. But too often, that's all we think about. And if you have learned anything from all these folks and from one another in the course of the last 2 weeks, you need to be learning to think outside the box, to think with all of your senses. Is this the first time that anybody has said anything to you about thinking and crossing from all of your senses? Of course not. We've talked to you about touch and taste and feel and smell, and all of those things can impeach. Can they not? I mean, let's think about all of the ways. Okay? And we'll come back to so many of these things. A photograph can impeach. A video can impeach. An audio recording can impeach. If I am trying a DUI case and my client was in an accident and my client called 911. Anybody ever had this case? Right? What's the cop going to say when the cop gets on the stand? The same thing that every DUI cop says when he comes out of a deep sleep. I smell the odor of an unknown alcoholic beverage. I see bloodshot and watery eyes, and I hear slurred and thick-tongued speech, right? Which your client just so happens not to have on that 911 call, in which she is speaking as clearly as she could possibly speak, right? It's not the statement, it's the sound. It is the fact that it is clear. So audio can impeach, right? With the ears. Physical characteristic or condition, we'll talk about this. Documents, calculations, measurements. Don't worry about writing these all down. I'll come back to the slide. Learned treatises, right? When you're cross-examining an expert, or even when it's not an expert, right? How about the cop who just is a cop who happens to have, who's not been qualified as an expert, but who is talking about the confession that your client made and happens to have been through Reed interrogation training school. Do you think that the Reed technique books can be used as learned treatise impeachment? I promise you that they can. I've done it. There's stuff in those books about false confessions. You might want to take a look at it, because those can be fun things to ask that cop about on cross-examination, to impeach him with, right? Motive, interest, and bias. David Lewis is standing in the back. This is, by the way, you all know that all of this is about theft. Good lawyering is all about theft. It is about finding good shit to steal from other lawyers, okay? And David, for years, I have heard lecture, and it's stuck in my head. Michelle Levine and John Sands always talk about, rhyme, rhythm, and repetition. David talks about bias is never collateral. In my, dreams, I hear David saying, bias is never collateral. What does that mean? It means that you can always impeach with motive, interest, and bias, and you can always prove it by extrinsic evidence. Isn't it true that you're lying about this in order to get a great deal? No, it's not. Can I prove up the deal by extrinsic evidence? Absolutely, I can. Motive, interest, and bias. Those are your three biggest friends. Convictions. We all know prior felony conviction can be used to impeach. We also know that you can impeach in most places, with a conviction of a misdemeanor or even a petty offense that goes to what? What?
Truthfulness.
You're mumbling.
Truthfulness.
Truthfulness, right. False statements. Okay. Specific instances of untruthful conduct. Testimony of another witness, where you can set up for this witness to impeach with the testimony of somebody else who's going to say, no, that's false. And of course, prior inconsistent statements. I want to just give you examples of some of the things that we talk about that, physical characteristics, right? Who remembers this scene in To Kill a Mockingbird, right? There's some testimony about, he held me down with, both hands or something like that. Remember the one guy's hand? Can you, right? And he does this. Right. The one hand comes up, and he catches the, you got to pick the right witness, and the guy catches the thing with his hand. What is he doing, right? He is demonstrating the fallacy of the testimony way more effectively than talking about, well, isn't it true that my client has, one hand that's screwed up? He just demonstrated it to the jury. That demonstration is impeachment just as clearly as calling another witness to say, no, she lied, right? This is one of my favorites, okay? The glass eye, right? Again, from DUI case. Cop wants to talk about how my client had nystagmus in both eyes. I'm just telling you right now, you cannot have more fun in a courtroom, clothes on, clothes off, than having your client take his eye out and put it on the table. I'm just saying, it's really, you just want to look for those cases, okay? How about intoxication? Does it impeach somebody's testimony if we can show that they were intoxicated at the time that they made the statement, or that they made the perception that we are saying is false? Well, sure it does. And if you can demonstrate that, what are all the ways that you can demonstrate intoxication? Do you want to think about taking the shot glasses and lining them up on the table in front of the witness, right? Oh, you weren't intoxicated. You had the 6 shots, and we can prove that, but you weren't intoxicated. That's impeachment, right? My cousin Vinny, right? Remember my cousin Vinny? And what are those things? Those are the bushes, and what are those leafy things on those are leaves, right? And you couldn't see. How about poor eyesight? Is impeachment of, because it demonstrates the fallacy of what it is that the witness has said, what the witness has testified to. This is absolutely one of my favorites. This isn't actually the photograph, but a cop who testifies that the cause of this accident was that the client came speeding up over a hill and didn't see the bicyclist, and that caused him to hit the bicycle and caused this terrible accident. Okay, seems reasonable. You all know the problem. There's no hill at that intersection, right? And so it was lots and lots and lots and lots of fun to be able to just commit and recommit that cop to that cause of that accident, and then walk up with the picture marked that shows the intersection, that just makes it absolutely clear there's no hill, okay? It looks kind of like that, straight for as far as the eye can see. That's impeachment, right? We're impeaching the truth of his testimony with what the jury can see with its own eyes, that photograph shows us what's what. Watch the bottom of the picture here, right? You see that guy? This is from the murder of Darren Williams. That witness, the guy coming through that crowd, testified that he was there that night, but he was very calm. And he did not have any hassle with anybody at all, okay? So there's a piece of video. Can I do it again? Yes. Watch the bottom. Whoa, where am I going? Never mind. There it is. Just watch the bottom. If you show that to a jury enough times, it becomes pretty clear, right? That guy's statement, that is wonderful impeachment of his statement as to what his state of mind was, that he was calm, that he wasn't in a fight, that he wasn't in any way aggressive towards anybody that night, right? Same case, same witness, that is the guy in the middle, who was a paid informant, who was looking at, death if he got charged with this murder, least life imprisonment, who took off and went to Mexico because he was so afraid for himself and his family, right, that he had to flee the country. And lucky for us, when he came back after having cut his deal, the cops grabbed his cell phone. And so we were able to show the jury just how scared for his life he was as he was hiding out in Mexico. This is wonderful stuff. It's not just the pictures, of course, that can be impeachment for us these days, but the cell phone data as well, right? time of call, cell tower, location, GPS. Remember the whole thing. Every one of these pictures on almost all of these phones has embedded in it the GPS, where exactly it was taken and what time. You get a hold of some witness's cell phone or the records from that cell phone, there may be really, really powerful impeachment stuff in there, okay? So that's why I'm talking about, you have to think about all of these tools, because when this happens in court, when this happens with a witness whose credibility you need to attack, who is a central part of your opponent's theory of the case, there's nothing better that can happen for you than for the witness to give you the opportunity to impeach. And so you need to look for it in every place that you possibly can. Okay? Let me figure out where I am. Let's go back to some of these other tools, okay? Just to talk about examples. Documents, weather reports, right? Bank statements, calendars, letters, time cards, brochures, web pages, right? You all are being brought up as lawyers at a time when so much information is instantaneously available to you. It's unbelievable. The amount of stuff that you can get instant access to challenge the truthfulness of what somebody has said. It's really extraordinary. Specific instances of untruthful conduct under Rule 608. This is always fun and it is sometimes tricky. So, for example, these are things that cannot be proved by extrinsic evidence. So, for example, you have a witness who is made an identification, and you are able to get a hold of a loan application that witness did. Your investigator finds that for you, and you find a lie on that loan application. And so you cross-examine the witness about that lie, and the witness says, I don't know what you're talking about, it never happened. Can you prove that by extrinsic evidence? And so the answer is no, if the way that you're offering it is for, as a specific instance of untruthful conduct under Rule 608. So that's where the kind of exercise that I just watched Group B finishing up, and that most of you did about how many different ways can we look to find to get Husser's statement in, that's where that kind of thing becomes a very practically important exercise. Because if we can find another way, and we can convince a judge that this is not in fact 608, that it goes to motive, interest, and bias, well, now we've got a much better shot, because now we know we can prove it by extrinsic evidence. Now, I don't know how you get to motive, interest, and bias on an identification witness with a loan application, but that's why you spend half an hour trying to figure out all these crazy-ass ways to get Husser's statement in. Because maybe you just come up with some crazy idea that you're able to sell. I mean, remember that this is evidence, and the bottom line is it's going to come in if the judge wants it to come in and thinks it's interesting and is convinced that there may be something there, and it's not going to come in if the judge doesn't like you, or there's all this other stuff that goes on. So you need to be thinking about everything that you can possibly think of as a way to give the judge some reason, some hook to hang his hat on to try and give you the shot. Okay, let's talk about how you do this. The famous recipe, RAC, right? Recommit, accredit, confront. Although recommit isn't always okay. That's the recipe. And it doesn't matter, and again, we talk about this so often just in terms of prior and consistent statements. But it's not, the recipe's not any different if it's a photograph, right? The recipe's not any different if it's a video or a piece of audio or a document. The recipe is the same. We want to recommit the witness to what we know to be the false statement so that we make sure that the jury hears it. Now, the reason it's not necessarily recommit is that we may be doing this on purpose, right? The witness may not have said anything at all on direct about this particular false statement, but we know that the witness will say it, right? Because maybe the witness has said it before, and we also know that we can impeach it. So the first thing we're doing is committing them to it. But CAC is CAC, and that's like, not nearly as good as RAC. CAC makes me think of what, my cat Roscoe does. So RAC, all right? So we need to have the jury make sure that they hear what we know to be the false statement because we can impeach it. Yes, we want them to repeat something that was bad for us. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. We are going to repeat bad testimony for the purpose of setting up the contrast. So also remember that that's what impeachment is about. Always, always, always remember that what this is about is setting up the contrast between what's false and what's true. What hurts our theory of the case and what advances our theory of the case. What is wrong and what is right. Right? That's what we're doing with impeachment. You said X, that's false. The truth is Y. And we're always about trying to make that contrast as stark and as clear and as dramatic as we possibly can. Okay? So the first thing we have to do is recommit them to it. We then need to accredit what the impeaching tool is. What's accrediting the impeaching tool? It is doing whatever we need to do to convince the jury that the impeaching tool that we have in our hand is more credible, more reliable than what the witness said. So most of you have done this with a prior inconsistent statement. It's why the prior inconsistent statement is more credible. It was under oath. It was made closer in time. It was made to the police at the time that the witness was desperately wanting to help solve the crime. What is it with a piece of video? Well, with a piece of video and a photograph, there's not a whole lot that you have to do to accredit that, right? It's not nearly as hard a piece of work. With a document, it might be. But that's the next thing that we're going to do, is we're going to ask questions on cross of the witness to establish what it is, why it is that the impeaching tool deserves more credit than what the witness has said. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to confront the witness with the impeaching tool. I'm showing you the photograph that's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit F. Isn't it true that there is no hill at that intersection, right? I'm showing you the videotape of you walking through that crowd on January 1st, 2007. That's you, isn't it? We're confronting. Then comes the fourth and final, and what I'm absolutely convinced is the most difficult step. Anybody know what it is? You think I'm kidding? I'm so not kidding. It is so hard to do this. It is so much fun when you get to impeach. It is so great that when you've gone through these things and you've done the confrontation and you say, but you said under oath on January 4th the light was red, having already committed them to the light is green, right? And the witness says, whatever the witness said, which doesn't really matter at that point, right? And you know what most of us want to do? It was so much fun. We hit them so hard, they are so dead, we want to do it again. Right? So we try and find some way to do that again, and it never, ever works nearly as well the second time around. And when you try and do it again, what happens is all you're really doing is giving the witness an invitation to give some explanation. And they can be, they are so afraid at that point and so angry that there's all sorts of inventiveness that then comes to them about ways that they can explain away this wonderful thing that you have just that you've just demonstrated for the jury. So you've got to remember to stop. You've got to listen to what you're doing. You've got to listen to the witness, because when you get that confrontation and it's done, you have made your point and this is over and done with. All right, next thing. The 4 ingredients are absolutely important. And over and over again, we talk about RAC. Recommit, accredit, confront. You do it. Recommit, accredit, confront. All right. So, groups. You know, what's the second half of the alphabet? We get to L, like from, you know, D, E, F to L, okay? Rep after rep after rep on recommit, accredit, confront. Stop, right? Recommit, accredit, confront, stop. As many times as you can, because it's got to be like the body memory to you of a football player, a dancer, a guy hitting a baseball, whatever it is. This has got to become like body memory to you. But the fact is that the order is not necessarily sacred, all right? There are circumstances under which you want to vary this thing, okay? So, for example, if you happen to have if what you're impeaching with is going to take a long time to accredit, for example, a prior inconsistent statement, right? Certain kinds of prior inconsistent statements. Something like, for example, a victim of a crime who is given an identification that now in court is different than the description, a description, not an identification, but a description that is different than the description that was given at the time of the crime, okay? Now you absolutely have to persuade that jury that that prior description, which does not fit your client, is more credible than the description given in court, which does fit your client. You with me? I know it's late. I know I may be boring. Stick with me here, okay? We need to impeach. The witness comes in, gives a description in court that fits your client to a T. The fact is that earlier on, at the time of the crime, he told the cops a description that does not fit your client, okay? We're now going to impeach with that prior inconsistent statement, right? But what we have to do, we all know, because we do this, we all know instantly that that prior identification is more credible. But the jury doesn't necessarily know that. And you're the only person that's going to be able to explain that to them. And you're going to explain that to them by your questions of that witness on cross, okay? It's a lot of questions. It's going to take a long time, right? Y'all, most of you know this. You gave this statement. You gave this statement to the police. You gave it to them on X date. That was 14 minutes after you had been robbed. You had just seen the person. Though you knew that the police were wanting to catch this guy. You know this whole thing, right? It takes a long time. Here's the problem. You know that a wonderful punchline is coming. The prosecutor knows it. The witness may even know it. The jury doesn't have a fucking clue that a punchline is coming. They are sitting there thinking, why is he going on and on and on about this? And as they are doing that, they may be forgetting that you already recommitted the person to that bad description. And so my suggestion to you is that if you have an accreditation that's going to take a long time, you may want to switch up this order. There is no reason that you can't accredit that statement first. There's no reason that you can't go through that litany that I was just talking about you talked to the police, you talked to them at the time, you talked to them blah, 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 and then say that you are recommitting them, right? You've done your accreditation now, you've talked about the whole thing, and very, very quickly you say, and on direct you said, bushy beard, right? Which fits your client. And then immediately make the contrast and do the confront. But in that statement that we talked about, you said clean shaven. You've done the contrast now. And you haven't ruined your punchline. It's the contrast in the end that's most important. So think about that and never, ever, ever forget the fourth step, right? Once you've done that, you don't go back and say, whatever it is that we're dying to say at that point. It feels so good. I'm telling you, there will be more than one of you that does this tomorrow. Okay, here's another variation. The self-accrediting tool. Remember I said to you, the opposite of that long spiel that you have to do to set up the prior inconsistent statement, I think, is a photograph. The photograph, how much do you have to do to accredit that the photograph is what it is? Right? You're not using the photograph, you're not impeaching with it unless it's really clear. Unless when you look at it and everybody else you've showed it to looks at it and says, yep, there's no hill there. Yep, that guy's eyes are blue. Whatever it is, the purpose that you're using it for. So, okay, if that's the case, then we can recommit, and maybe we confront right away with the photograph, and then very quickly do whatever it is that we have to do with the impeaching tool. Because you want to get as quickly as you can to that dramatic moment. Right? You want to get as powerfully as you can. More important than quickly. You want to get as powerfully as you can to that dramatic moment. What you told this jury was false. We know the truth to be X. Right? And then what do? Right. Wow, that was really weak, you guys. That was what my nephew calls weak sauce. Okay. Let's talk about prior inconsistent statements. Because that's the one that we spend more time than anything else doing. All right? To me, the whole name of the game here is preparing. And that means that you have to have the source of your prior inconsistent statements right there in front of you and have that impeachment at your fingertips. And hopefully somebody talked to you about what this looks like and how you do this when you write cross. This is not something that you do by the seat of your pants. It's something that you have to be prepared for, and there's a very labor-intensive way of doing it. Again, you're not going to do it unless it advances your theory of the case. Okay? And unless it advances your theory of the witness. So I want to give you an example of what an impeachment is going to look like, or what I'm talking about having it sourced and what the page of your cross, I think, ought to look like. You have to write it out. This, to me, is another reason that you have to write out cross-examinations. You have to write the questions. You have to think about the order that you're going to ask the questions in, because you have to have the impeachment there at your fingertips. If the witness squirms, if the witness tries to run down one of those halls that you're trying to close off the doors of with your leading questions. Okay? So this is a chapter about horizontal gaze nystagmus and how flashing lights can cause horizontal gaze nystagmus. And my purpose at the end of this chapter is to have said to the jury, the flashing lights on this police car caused this client's horizontal gaze nystagmus. Okay? That's the important point of that chapter of that cross. So what's over there in the left-hand column is the page number and line number of where the witness said every one of the things that I'm going to ask him. Now that to me is writing out a question of cross, okay? Because the question is going to be, officer, flashing lights can cause horizontal gaze nystagmus, can't they? I know where he said that. If he has figured out, since the time of the motions hearing when he said that, that that's not a good thing for him to say, and he says, no, horizontal gaze nystagmus cannot be caused by flashing lights, what happens if I'm not prepared for this? Right? Then what I know is, oh, I can impeach him. And somewhere in my file sitting over there on my desk is a transcript in which I know, because I was there and I asked him the question, and I remember that he said, flashing lights can cause horizontal gaze nystagmus. What do you figure my odds are of finding that place in that transcript in that moment? I'll tell you what they are for me. 0. I am pumping so much adrenaline at that point that I can go over and say to the, I go and I say, Judge, may I have a moment? He might as well say, you can have 3 hours. Because I'm pumping so much adrenaline at that point that as I start to go through the file, I'll be lucky if I find the transcript, right? Which may be sitting right on top of the file. Let alone finding the page, let alone finding the line. I'm telling you, it's just not going to happen. So, you write the page and the line number of every single answer that you know he gave. And people say to me, but, there's so many of these things that you're putting this on that it's so obvious. You had flashing lights on your car. Really? You're going to take the time to source that? Yes, I am. Because I promise you, the one thing that you don't source is the one thing that he's going to get squirrely on. I don't know why. Somehow they know that's what they do. Okay? So yes, you had flashing lights on your car. The lights are red and blue. Notice that I have no source for that. Okay? I didn't ask him that question. That's important for me to know. Because maybe he says they're green and blue. Maybe he says, no, what I had on were the yellow flashers. Okay? I can't impeach him. If the source isn't there, then I know I can't impeach him. And I have to go on. Why am I asking that question? Because it doesn't really matter to me if they're really red and blue. It matters that they're flashing lights. I'm pretty sure that they're red and blue. But if he says no, I need to know instantly that I can't impeach him. I don't want to do the judge, can I have a minute, go looking for the thing, not find it, and then have to go on. I just look stupid. And what I want the jury to learn, this is another thing about that long accreditation, by the way. You may need to do that early in the trial, but if you have a witness that you're going to impeach a lot, the jury learns, right? They hear the first couple of questions out of your mouth, they know exactly where you're going. Now you can accredit for as long as you want, because they know a punchline's coming. And they're looking for it just as much as you are. Juries will learn that just when you go to pick up the notebook that has the transcript in it, and you say, you remember testifying before, they know what's coming, right? You do it enough times, the witness knows what's coming. How many of you have had this happen? And they just say, yeah, whatever's in there. Oh, no, sir. We ain't going to do that easy. You're going to rob me of my confrontation? I don't think so. This is the most fun I get to have, right? Okay, so, where was I? All right. That one's not sourced. They're bright. That one's not sourced. They're designed to be seen from a long way off. Mostly amazed, the lights are effective. They reflect off of everything. Your car's parked behind his. They're pointed at the rear of his car. You had him facing the rear of his car. The flashing lights were reflecting off the rear of his car. Have I proven my point? Sure. So what do I want to do next? So, your flashing lights caused his horizontal gaze nystagmus, right? No. Wrong. The cop can never, ever admit that. That's one question too many. A really good way to recognize when you've asked one question too many is if you hear yourself in a courtroom saying the word so, stop. You're about to ask one question too many. Okay? You know what? Arguably, you could say flashing lights were reflecting off the rear of his car. You could argue that that's one question too many. Notice that it's not sourced. If I have a witness that's really fighting me, I may just stop at you had him facing the rear of his car. Have I made the point at that point? Does the jury get it? Do I need to say? No, I probably don't. I probably don't. But I sure as shit am not going to say, so. I'm going to remember my own advice about impeachment. Okay? And I'm going to sit the fuck down. This is what impeachment looks like when you're not prepared. Okay? When you haven't thought it through and you haven't sourced everything. Right? You haven't spent the time late at night. You're ready to go. You're going to fight. Okay? You're going to take this witness down. Right? Because you know he's lying. You're going to shoot somebody, right? That's why you have to prepare. That's why you spend the long nights sitting at your little computer in your office at 11 o'clock sourcing your cross. So that when you get the opportunity, when the witness gives you not what is an oh shit moment of, oh, she has said something different, what the hell am I going to do about that? You just start glowing because it's like, oh, now I get to do this thing. Now I get to have, this fun, and I am not going to look like this, okay? I want to talk to you about some other potential pitfalls in the impeachment business, okay? First of all, you may have to do, in order to set this up properly, in order to set an impeachment up, you may need to do what I think of as translating. Translating what the witness has said on direct that you want to impeach into the same language or terms as the impeaching tool that you have. Okay? Let me try and give you an example. I know I made a point about this. For example, what the witness says, you have an impeaching tool, right? You have a statement of that witness from the night of the event in which the witness has said, I was completely sober. Yes, I had something to drink, but I was completely sober. Okay? What the witness says on direct is, actually we should do this the other way around. The witness said, you have a statement from the witness that says, I had a few drinks. Okay? You know you have a statement from the witness that says, I had a few drinks. And on direct, the witness says, I was completely sober. Knowing that you can prove that the truth is the witness was drinking, you love it when the witness says, I was completely sober, right? Because now you have the opportunity to impeach. But completely sober, is that necessarily completely inconsistent with, I had a few drinks? No. Right, not necessarily. So what that means is that when you go to recommit that witness to, I was completely sober, you have to translate it. What you'd really like to translate that into, and what you have to give a shot at with your leading question is, I had absolutely nothing to drink. Right? Because now you know that you've got, in exactly the same words, a great piece of impeachment. I had a few drinks. So you have to do the translating. Sometimes it's very, very important to be able to do that. And sometimes it's the difference between impeaching and not impeaching. Because you have to make sure that what you're impeaching with really is inconsistent. And not just inconsistent to you as a criminal defense lawyer, you as any kind of lawyer, but you as a juror. You have to put your jurors' ears on. Is the jury going to say, so what, who gives a shit? Because if they do, and you may try and make a big deal out of this, you look stupid. Worse, you look like you're being unfair to the witness. So you have to be absolutely clear that it really is inconsistent. And make sure that you judge that. It's another reason that you have to prepare and that you have to get ready in advance to do this stuff. And you need to know, here's the way, again, it's why you have to write the question out. Because it's at that point that you think to yourself, I have a great piece of impeachment here if I can turn this into, I had absolutely nothing to drink. I have nothing if all I have is, I had a few drinks. Right? I was completely sober, whichever way I actually figured out that works. Impeachment by omission. This is something that there's a problem on, at least one problem on tomorrow. It's something that we often do, and it's something that, quite frankly, the longer I do this, the less I think of. The problem is that you have to do a phenomenal job of convincing the jury that the witness had a huge obligation to say whatever is being, whatever was omitted at the time that it was omitted, right? This is the thing where what you want to impeach with is, you never said that before, right? You're saying it now, you never said that before. Your job is you have to convince the jury that there was, a moral obligation, in essence, to say it before. Now, we're all always wanting to do that with police reports, because we know how police work is and how police work ought to work, and we know that if it didn't go in the report, it means that it didn't happen. How many of you have tried to do this in front of a judge and had a judge tell you, I don't really care, so he didn't put it in the report, so what, who cares? I think most juries react the same way. Not 100% of the time, but the problem is this disconnect. We are so pissed off about it because it so gets in our way. We are so pissed off about it because it is such a trick of theirs to be able to add shit and puff it up later that we desperately want to do this thing to them. We desperately want to shoot these guys. But this is what's going to wind up happening most of the time, is that you just wind up in the quicksand. Because you're doing this whole thing, but the jury's like, right? So you really have to think, I think, long and hard about, are you going to do an impeachment by omission in front of a jury? And if you are, what exactly do you need to do to accredit the fact that they were obligated to say this before? I just think you have to think very, very long and hard about that. One of the other things about confrontation, and this is one of these, I don't know, maybe more subtle and esoteric points. Lawyers love to tell stories about some wonderful piece of impeachment that they did, and we all have them, right? I mean, I've told you some in the course of this lecture, because it really is just incredibly fun, and it's incredibly powerful. It's one of the most powerful things that can happen in a courtroom. So we love to tell these stories, and lawyers love to tell you stories about little tricks that they do with confrontation. I am not a fan of big tricks on confrontation. And that's because I'm a control freak, okay? Lawyers like to tell you things like, and so when I go to impeach with the prior inconsistent statement, I like to have the witness read the words from the transcript, because the witness reading the words makes this contrast of what they have just said even more dramatic. And I agree that that can be true. But the problem is that when you ask the witness to do the reading, in my opinion, you're giving up control. And we have taught you, and you have fought so long and hard to get control of the witness on cross. Why do you want to give them an opportunity to take it away from you? Why do you want to take the chance that that witness is going to find a way to inflect that makes it sound differently than you can? Why don't you want to take the opportunity to give the inflection to the words that you want? Right? Can't you, by the way you read it, by the way you emphasize it, make it seem even more dramatic? Absolutely. You are the one and only person in that courtroom whose interest is to make that moment as dramatic as it is. You're going to hand that to the person whose interest it is to minimize it? I'm not about risk, guys. I'm just, I don't like roller coasters. I don't like scary movies. I don't like asking open-ended questions on cross, and I'm not handing the thing over to the witness to read. It just seems to me like there are way too many ways that it can backfire, okay? People like to talk about you do the impeachment by omission and you tell the witness to raise his hand And okay, now you read your statement and put your hand down when you come to the place where you said X, whatever the impeaching thing is. And so you wind up with the guy sitting there with his hand in the air for I have no doubt that people have done that it was dramatic, that it was wonderful. I know that there have been times when I've tried it or I've watched people try it, where down comes the hand, right? Because he's decided to fuck with you, basically, right? And now what? Now you're in a fight, right? And what's the fight? The fight is now you have to say, well, why'd you put your hand down? The thing's not there. Well, yes, it is. Well, no, it's not. Well, yes, it is. Right? That's not so good. Well, yes, it is. What do you mean that it is? And you know how you're going to solve that eventually? You're going to take the thing back, and you're going to say, it's not in here anyplace. You're going to put it up on the Elmo and say, that's the whole statement. There's nothing there, right? Which is what, in my view, you should have done in the first place, right? The parlor tricks, to me, is not what it's about. What it's about always, right? You have this theory of the case. The witness has said something that hurts it. They've said something that hurts it in a way that has given you the opportunity dramatically to demonstrate the truth of your theory of the case. You can't ask for any better gift. You cannot ask for any better gift in a trial than the ability to demonstrate to that jury this witness just lied to you. So what do? You prepare. And you make sure that you don't find yourself caught up in the quicksand. So you got a bunch of problems, you got a bunch of stuff to do for tomorrow. Go prepare, go get it sourced, and be clean and powerful when you do it.